the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today here on Point of View. We have a lot to cover, and I thought I might just give some perspective. You know, I've been doing Point of View for about 30 years, and it used to be, in the old days, not so long ago, that July was a time in which sometimes there wasn't a lot happening. Oftentimes Congress was in recess, and so Tom, that would be a good time maybe to focus on maybe a couple of teaching programs, certainly some book interviews and the rest. Not anymore. I've made a short list here of at least a half a dozen things we hopefully will talk about today, and that doesn't even include any of the religious liberty issues we'll be talking about tomorrow with our typical roundtable guests, Kelly Shackelford and Penna Dexter. Today we have the FBI Director James Comey, who was called to Congress to explain why he did not believe that the Justice Department should indict Hillary Clinton. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about that. And in a related move in the United States Senate right now, you have Senator John Cornyn and Senator Cory Gardner, who have introduced a bill that would actually strip Hillary Clinton of her security clearance because of some of the actions that were taken by her and some of the revelations that came from the FBI report. By the way, if you thought this was all over when James Comey issued his report and then when Loretta Lynch decided to go along with it, you'd be sadly mistaken. There's a whole lot more coming down the pike. So we will spend a little bit of time talking about that. But I think it's about time to also focus on some of these shootings. You know, we have new video that surfaced of the shooting of Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge. Of course, you've had thousands of protesters who gathered last night outside the door in the store where he was killed. We now have, of course, the fact that the police killed Philando Castile in Minnesota. His girlfriend, Diamond Reynolds, actually live streaming this after the shooting and eventually the killing of her boyfriend. So that is certainly one other topic to put on the table. We've already had scheduled, and we'll talk about later this hour with Dr. John Lott about the issue of gun control, and he'll join us talking about some of the gun control legislation and really even the harsh realities. We've posted in one of our articles here that most terrorist attacks take place in gun-free zones. So we're going to get into the issue of guns as well. And a little bit later, probably that gets into the second hour. As we get closer to the Republican convention, there's a move afoot to change the rules of the Republican convention, which would unbind many of the delegates pledged to Donald Trump. And if that's the case, he has 888 delegates locked up, but you need, as we've talked about on this program before, 1,237 delegates to win the nomination on the floor. So those are just a half a dozen topics I figured we might get into today. And at any point, if you want to raise a question about one of those, make a comment, feel free. As always, we are going to open up the phones much earlier today. And over the next 2 hours, you will have a forum to share some of your thoughts and comments, ask questions, make comments. 1-800-351-1212. Let me get to James Comey. He came to the House today and actually began to speak on this issue, and it was very clear from the outset that he was trying his best to try, number one, to defend his decision and go out of his way to not say that Hillary Clinton lied, but that didn't work very well at all. I'm going to spend a fair amount of time today quoting from Trey Gowdy. I think some of the things that he said and some of the questions he asked, even though he was just one of the members of the panel asking questions, certainly deserve some attention. And I'm reading now, as a matter of fact, from a piece that appeared in Politico. It says, during an extended exchange with Representative Trey Gowdy, James Comey affirmed that the FBI's investigation found information marked classified on her server even after Hillary Clinton has said that she neither sent nor received any items marked classified. Tomorrow we're going to probably get into it a little bit more with our roundtable, but I thought it was interesting to see that at one point James Comey had to say, there were a number of portion markings on some of the documents, which means that you couldn't claim, well, I didn't know it was classified. I just thought we were actually passing unclassified information. No, there were markings on some of those, even after, as we've talked about on this program before, some of those were stripped. Now, ask whether Hillary Clinton's testimony that she did not email any classified material to anyone on my email and there was no classified material was true. After some hemming and hawing and some kind of different back and forth, James Comey responded, no, there was classified material that were emailed. So then Trey Gowdy said, okay, Senator or Secretary Clinton said she used one device. Was that true? Well, then again, James Comey had to admit she used multiple devices during the 4 years of her term as Secretary of State. And of course, you're starting to see something that if you're out on Facebook right now, I'm sure you've seen it. I know a number of groups have put together where you have first the verbal statements made by Hillary Clinton and then the comments made on Tuesday by James Comey. And you can see, obviously, there were a number of very significant differences between the comments and basically the explanations that came from Hillary Clinton and then the contradictions that came from James Comey. So he also, again, was asked by Trey Gowdy whether or not it was true that Hillary Clinton returned all work-related emails to the State Department. And James Comey said, quote, no, we found work-related emails, thousands that were not returned, unquote. So Trey Gowdy asked another one. So Secretary Clinton said neither she or anyone else deleted work-related emails from her personal account. Was that true? That's the question from Trey Gowdy. Okay, James Comey said, well, that's a harder one to answer. He went on, though, to say, quote, we found traces of work-related emails on devices or in Slack space. Whether they were deleted or whether when a server changed out, something happened to them, there is no doubt that the work-related emails that were removed electronically from the email system, unquote. Again, you can see him working so hard not to have to say that she was a liar and that she misrepresented the facts. But Trey Gowdy wasn't through because he then asked whether or not Hillary Clinton's lawyers read every one of the emails. James Comey said, well, no, that's not the case. And so finally, then Trey Gowdy said, in the interest of time, because I have a plane to catch tomorrow afternoon, I'm not going to go through any more of the false statements, but I am going to ask that you put on your old hat. False exculpatory statements. They are used for what? And Comey responded, either for the substantive prosecution or the evidence of intent in a criminal prosecution. Trey Gowdy went back and said, exactly, intent and consciousness of guilt, right? Is that right? Well, consciousness of guilt and intent. In your old job, you would prove intent, as you just referenced, by showing the jury evidence of a complex scheme that was designed for the very purpose of concealing the public record, and you would be arguing, in addition to concealment, the destruction that you and I just talked about, or certainly the failure to preserve. Well, I can go on, but we're coming up to a break. But the point I'm making is that Trey Gowdy has a much better, I think, explanation. Not that this was careless, and not that this was a gross negligence, but it was very careful, deliberate, with a deliberate intent to conceal the public record and a deliberate attempt to actually deceive the American people. Thought it was a very good interchange, and it's just one of the things that surfaced in the House hearings. But again, when we come back, I'll talk a little bit about this Senate bill that would actually revoke Hillary Clinton's security clearance. And as we'll even talk about on the program tomorrow, we've dug up some stories of what would happen if Hillary Clinton had been in the military and had done this. But let's take a break, and we'll take some of your phone calls.
1-800-351-1212. This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Pro-life groups and legislatures wonder what they might be able to do in light of the Supreme Court decision last week. The 5-3 decision that struck down the legislation in Texas left little room for any future pro-life legislation. The court's ruling prevented the state of Texas from regulating the health and safety standards of abortion clinics. It also struck down the common sense requirement that a physician performing an abortion also have admitting privileges in a hospital within 30 miles of where the procedure is performed. The majority on the court argued that it was an undue burden on women to require abortion clinics be governed by the same rules as ambulatory surgical centers. And in throwing out the law, they also threw out the requirement that abortion clinics comply with basic fire safety standards. Consider the irony for a moment. Progressives in our government want to regulate nearly every industry except the abortion industry, and the High Court seems content to let them do it. We have regulations on the air we breathe and the water we drink. We have regulations about the light bulbs you can have in your home. Many are now working hard to regulate guns out of existence without even having to repeal the Second Amendment. But when it comes to killing the unborn in abortion clinics, they don't want any limits or any rules. It's difficult to see what pro-life legislators can do until the makeup of the Supreme Court changes. The 5 justices have effectively ruled against just about any common sense regulation of abortion clinics. That is why the November election will be crucial. 3 of the 5 in the majority are due for retirement. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is 83 years of age. Justice Anthony Kennedy will turn 80 this summer, and Justice Stephen Breyer will turn 78 this summer. It is clear that the next president will determine the pro-life future. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Talking about the testimony today by FBI Director James Comey, but also, as I mentioned just a minute ago, Senate bill would actually revoke Hillary Clinton's security clearance. This has been introduced by, again, Senator John Cornyn from Texas and Senator Cory Gardner from Colorado. Where it goes, we do not know, but there have others like the House Speaker Paul Ryan and also the Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley, who've also called for the security clearances to be revoked. And so that will be one of the battles on Capitol Hill. I might mention that we always post a number of articles for you to read or to pass on. This one from Ben Shapiro that we've posted, which talks about the fact that it's not just the corruption that shocks, it's the flagrant, shameless display of it, as he calls it, the utterly transparent corruption, and reminds us that, of course, last Wednesday, a CBS reporter spotted former President Bill Clinton meeting with Attorney General Loretta Lynch in the Phoenix airport. No photographs were allowed by the FBI. Same day, the Obama administration announced that President Obama would fly with Hillary Clinton to North Carolina on Tuesday, which they did on Air Force One. On Saturday, the FBI interviewed Hillary Clinton for 3 hours before she flew off to a performance of Hamilton in New York City. And on Sunday, the New York Times reported that Hillary Clinton might actually retain Loretta Lynch as the Attorney General. Then on Tuesday, you have FBI Director James Comey announcing a press conference and actually saying that Hillary Clinton would not be indicted. Now, again, does seem to me like there were some connections that most people could make in those various events. And if you'd like to do so, you're welcome to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Let's go to Eddie in Georgia. Start us off. Eddie, thanks for calling today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for taking my call. I'm confused. The FBI director the other day spent 30 minutes telling us all the laws that Hillary broke, even though a lot of them were misdemeanors. One of the questions that he was asked today was, do you think that Hillary Clinton broke any laws? His answer was no. So I'm confused as to how he's talking out of both sides of his mouth.
I think we're starting to see his failed attempt to try to, if you will, walk along a knife edge. My example that I've used for James Comey is basically John Roberts. And when you go back and read the John Roberts opinion on Obamacare, it reads as if he was going to strike it down as unconstitutional. But then, as you well know, in I think the 11th hour, we may not know this for years, but I'm just sure that eventually he just said, do I want to be the person that brings down the signature piece of legislation for Barack Obama and go down in history, especially after there had been an editorial talking about how if indeed the Supreme Court struck down Obamacare, the Supreme Court would be considered irrelevant, which I think is hilarious, but nevertheless. And so you could see the political pressure eventually getting to him. The same thing, if you listen to actually James Comey on Tuesday, it's almost like all of this was said so that he could actually call for an indictment, and then comes to the edge and then pulls away, because I think he also did not want to be a person who was seen as having a negative impact on the presidential election. And that's why you have this contradiction from a man who I have a lot of respect for. We're going to even get Andrew McCarthy on fairly soon here, and he is good friends with James Comey, and we like the man. We have respect for him, but I just think in this case the political pressure got to him, or else or else his lawyers didn't go along with him in the Justice Department. He decided to go that way. But go ahead, Eddie.
I think it's sad that he's been forced into corruption the way he is going, and I wishing him the best, and I hope that the truth all comes out, and maybe Donald Trump, and when he says that he was going to make America great again, maybe it's because he's going to make people in Washington start being a little bit more honest. We can only hope. You have a great day, sir.
Well, I appreciate you calling in. Thank you for starting us off. And again, this is basically gift wrapped for Donald Trump. It is amazing to me, though. This shows something about the American people. When all the scandals are breaking, first Benghazi, then emails, it's actually when Hillary Clinton seems to have done better in the polls. But again, these polls in July don't mean anything. The only poll that really means something takes place in November. But nevertheless, it is intriguing to see how this plays out, and we will continue to, of course, follow those stories as well. Let's head to North Carolina then. WLGP. Helen, thank you for calling today.
Good afternoon, Kerby. How are you?
Good. What would you like to add to our conversation?
Well, I have thoughts along the same line. I don't know how anybody that has watched what has been going on with the Clintons for a very long time, even before they came to Washington. They were up to their eyeballs in scandals and problems. Witnesses disappearing, evidence disappearing, along with Whitewater and all that sort of thing, mysterious deaths, and it seemed like no matter what they did, where they go, they're covered with Teflon and nothing sticks.
Well, and that has been a concern that some people have had, that even as these particular stories have unfolded time and time again, they don't stick for at least two reasons, Helen. Let's see if you agree with my assessment. Number one, because the mainstream press rarely holds them accountable. Even the other day, as I shared with some of you, you can learn a little bit about just reading the news with discernment. On Wednesday morning, you would expect that the lead story in USA Today, and I just picked on them, but I can pick on a whole bunch of others, but I picked USA Today because it's kind of a little less seen as liberal and certainly universal. Anybody around the country can get a USA Today. What's the lead story? Oh, it wasn't about Hillary Clinton and James Comey. It was about the casinos of who? Donald Trump. In other words, it was a very blatant attempt to change the narrative. It did have a story, but the top story, the one that you saw, top of the fold, was the story about Donald Trump's casinos. Now, they've been They've been working on that for weeks. You know, they could have run that 2 days ago. They could run it tomorrow. But instead, they run it the day after. And, of course, Hillary Clinton obviously knew it was coming out, or maybe even suggested to them that they run that, because all through her campaign yesterday, she talked about Donald Trump, the casinos, and even went to Atlantic City. This looked all so choreographed. So the first reason is, of course, that the press has given the Clintons oftentimes a pass. Not everybody, but certainly some of the mainstream press has. Number two, it has to do with the fact that even when you do surveys, there were surveys done a couple of months ago, and in round numbers, I'm not going to give you the exact numbers, in round numbers, almost 2/3 of Democrats who said they were going to vote for Hillary Clinton said it would not make any difference if she was indicted or not.
Oh.
Again, you ask a Republican, if your candidate's going to be indicted, would you vote for them? No. But again, there are just a lot of people that will vote for Hillary Clinton, even if she is indicted, even if she's convicted. That's says something as well about what's going on in our country right now.
Could she still run under those circumstances?
Well, she'd obviously be pardoned by the current president and individual that would make that less of an issue, I would think.
Oh, my God, help us. Thank you, Kerby, for all your good work. God bless.
Well, appreciate you calling. Let's, if we can, take another phone call real quickly. We'll go to Ohio. Susan, thank you for joining us today.
Hi. My question, or whatever, when President Nixon was impeached, can you sort of go over or compare what he did to what Hillary has done?
Sure. And we're coming to a break, so I'm going to be very superficial, and we can probably get into some of this in the second hour, because I do have John Lott coming up in just a minute. We're going to want to spend some time talking about gun control. But I think, again, the point is that in some respects, Watergate was the crime, but the bigger crime was the cover-up. And so once they could prove, or at least had lots of evidence, that indeed not only was the cover-up hatched at the lower levels of government, but it went all the way to the Oval Office, that's when you had a number of Republicans who came to the president and said, it's time for you to step down, because indeed they were already voting for articles of impeachment and would have done what they could to remove Richard Nixon from office. There is, I think, pretty good evidence from what I just quoted a few minutes ago from the testimony today by James Comey that there was a cover-up as well. The first is to create a device so that indeed the Freedom of Information Act would not be used to actually have access to those emails. Then the reality that it sure looks like a number of those emails were deleted. Now, there is a difference between 18 minutes on a tape that apparently was damning to Richard Nixon, and a number of emails that have been deleted, but there are some similarities. At the same time, let me be real honest, there's some very significant differences, but maybe we can cover those a little bit later. It's a good question, and it's one that I'm sure others will bring up as well. But we did also have a time to schedule to spend some time talking with John Lott about gun control and about these terrorist attacks, so he'll join us now, and then we'll cover some of these issues in the second hour.
They call this the information age. It used to be news was hard to come by and there were very few sources. Now, the problem isn't so much locating information, it's all over the place. The problem is figuring out who you can trust to bring you truthful analysis and insights. Job loss in America, is it China's fault? Is poverty around the world increasing or decreasing? Are the undercover Planned Parenthood videos really deceptive propaganda or a window into a world that many people don't want you to know about? What kind of experience does it take to be a good president? Is putting women in our special forces a great idea, or are there issues you may not be considering? Kerby Anderson has talked about all of these and much more on his regular Viewpoints commentaries. Sign up to get them in your inbox each weekday. Go to pointofview.net. Click on the link at the very top left of the page that says Connect with Point of View. That's pointofview.net and connect with Point of View. Let Kerby help you sort through information overload and find the truth with Viewpoints. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
We're talking about some of the testimony today by James Comey, FBI director, but we want to change topics, and we'll come back to some other topics in the second hour, including the shootings of a number of individuals in Baton Rouge and Minnesota. But we now bring to the microphone, as I mentioned before, Dr. John Lott. He's been on the program with us many times before. He's been a professor at the University of Chicago, Yale University, Stanford University, Wharton School, a Fox News contributor, as well as an individual that holds a PhD in economics from UCLA. You have perhaps seen some of his other books, More Guns, Less Crime, The Bias Against Guns, and a book that's coming out shortly called War on Guns, and we'll be talking about that with him when it comes out. He is the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center. Dr. John Lott, thank you once again for joining us here on Point of View.
No, it's great to talk to you again.
Let's, if we can, one of the articles I've posted came out just a few days ago by you, Why Terrorists Target Gun-Free Zones. Before we talk about terrorists, let's remind our listeners that in past interviews we've done with you, you've pointed out that when you've looked at some of these shooters, just these domestic individuals, not terrorists, but just individuals that are obviously mentally unbalanced, they're not totally unbalanced, because when you look, for example, at the killer James Holmes in Aurora, Colorado, he bypassed all sorts of movie theaters where you could carry and instead went to a movie theater which did not allow individuals to have concealed handguns. You've talked about in Charleston, South Carolina, where some of our listeners are, that the shooter Dylan Roof originally was going to go to the College of Charleston, then realized, well, no, they've got armed guards, so instead went to a church. We can see a pattern here, can't we? Whether we look at shooters in this country or terrorists, almost always they seem to be going to a gun-free zone.
Right. Well, it's just not in this country. It's worldwide. These people want to kill as many people as they can. They know that the faster somebody can arrive on the scene with the gun, the faster they're going to be stopped and the fewer casualties that they're going to be. So they do what anybody would do to try to make their job more successful and easier, and that is they choose carefully where to go. And in this case, they're choosing targets where they know victims can't defend themselves. Since 1950, with just 3 exceptions, all the mass public shootings in the United States have taken place where general citizens aren't allowed to go and defend themselves. And you've mentioned just a few cases. There was a case just a couple months ago in Detroit where a father was concerned that his son was getting involved with ISIS, contacted the FBI. The FBI put a tap on his phone, and they have a very chilling recording of him talking about planning an attack on one of the largest churches in the Detroit area. And he gave 2 reasons for why he had picked them. He had cased the church. He knew that they regularly had a very large attendance. And he also had discovered that the church explicitly banned its parishioners and others from being able to carry permitted concealed handguns on church property. And so he goes through a discussion about how that will make it easier for him to kill a large number of people there because nobody will be able to stop him, and it will be a while before the police are able to arrive on the scene.
Wow, incredible. Let's look at the worst and the largest mass public shooting in U.S. history. That's in Orlando, and of course 50 dead, but even preceding that was Christina Grimmie, who was murdered at a concert. Were both of those gun-free zones?
Yeah, right. 49 people were killed there. Florida is one of 10 states that bans permanent concealed handguns where more than 50% of the revenue is obtained from alcohol. There are 40 states that allow it. But, this person, this killer, had been to this nightclub many times. He knew the layout. He knew that there was one guard at the door who was armed, and he quickly exchanged shots with the person. One of the things that's not appreciated is how incredibly difficult of a job guards or police have in stopping these types of mass public shootings. basically an incredibly dangerous job for them to have, and that is when you have somebody in uniform or somebody who's clearly serving as a guard at a place, they're going to be the first targets.
Yes.
The Charlie Hebdo attack last January in Paris, the first person killed was the guard in front of the building that was there. After the Charlie Hebdo attack, the president of France ordered 10,000 military troops to be put on the streets of Paris in order to try to guard possible targets. It's just not serious. I mean, whether he put 100,000 or 150,000 rather than just 10,000, it still wouldn't have worked. I mean, first of all, not everybody's working 24 hours a day. But the thing is, there's so many possible targets, as was proved later in the year. I mean, there were 3 other mass public shootings in France last year. And, in the attack in November, it was simply impossible for the troops that were there to go and cover all the targets. So after the attack in November where 130 people were killed, the president of France put another 1,000 troops on the street. I mean, it's just the bizarre thing. The vast majority of people were killed at the one concert hall in Paris. There were 8 off-duty police officers who were in attendance at that concert hall, but since France has not allowed off-duty police officers to carry their guns with them,
yes,
all of them were disarmed. All of them were as defenseless as the citizens were there. I mean, it was just coincidence that you had that many off-duty police officers there at the event. But, the fact that they refused to even let off-duty police officers carry, which would seem to me to be a no-brainer, just kind of shows kind of the warped way that they have about viewing these things.
Let me just mention that if you're interested in more information, we always, of course, have links to the various websites. And first of all, we have a link to John Lott's website, a Crime Prevention Research Center, which is just crimeresearch.org. We have that link there as well. Posted this particular article, Terrorist Target Gun-Free Zones. And of course, as you well know, if you get my commentary on a regular basis, I do quote from John Lott. And one of those quotes had to do with some research that you and Bill Landis did a while back, in which you looked at all sorts of mass public shootings and you tried to see the impact of gun control laws. None of them had any kind of impact. The only thing that you found had any statistical significance was when you had a law that provided right to carry. And in your new article here, you even looked at 13 different types of gun control laws. Again, explain that, because right now we're being told that we need no-fly zone, no-fly list to prevent people from getting guns. We need more gun control. But you've looked at this in a statistical way to say there really only is one thing that seems to be effective in trying to at least reduce or even prevent some of these mass shootings. What is that?
Well, it's the passage of these right-to-carry laws. I mean, we have these laws now in all 50 states, but obviously that wasn't the case. The problem is that you have these gun-free zones that we've been talking about. So to the extent to which the attacks still occur in these states, they virtually always take place in these tiny areas within the state where permanent concealed handguns aren't allowed. And as we've talked about, this isn't by accident. I mean, it's just not, Aurora, Colorado, where there were 7 movie theaters, only one banned permanent concealed handguns. The guy went to the only one that banned permanent concealed handguns. The Lafayette movie theater shooting last year was exactly the same. You have many of these cases, as you mentioned, where these killers explicitly talk about choosing a venue where they know people aren't going to be able to go and defend themselves. And it's just, that's where they take place, in those tiny areas, even within the right-to-carry states. But the interesting thing is that when you see certain venues no longer become gun-free zones, then you stop seeing attacks in those venues.
Let's take a break. When we come back, if you'd like to join our conversation, we'll keep John Lott on for just a few more minutes. And certainly some of you might have some comments about gun control or about right to carry. I have posted some articles, and of course I might even point you to some of the commentaries I've written. You could type in gun-free zones. You'll find my commentary, for example, came out a couple of months ago. We have this article, Why Terrorists Target Gun-Free Zones. It was written by John Lott and appeared in the New York Post. And, of course, you can find all sorts of articles by him in his Crime Prevention Research Center website. And I might just mention that when his book comes out, War on Guns, we will certainly spend some time talking about that as well. But if you'd like to join our conversation, we'll stay on the topic of guns a little bit longer. 1-800-351-1212. What's your thoughts about gun-free zones? We'll take your calls right after this.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Talking about Second Amendment, gun control, and all sorts of issues related to it. If you'd like to join us, we'll have Dr. John Lott on for just a little bit longer, and you can join us 1-800-351-1212. Get to some of those calls in just a minute. But, John Lott, let me, if I can, maybe steal from what I think is probably going to be in your book, War on Guns, because you and I have talked about this before, and that is if we really want to do something that would be effective, it seems to me that we need to fix the National Instant Criminal Background Check system. And we've already had people saying, well, what about the no-fly list? Well, again, I know individuals that have been put on that list erroneously, but you have pointed out that the current system we have right now falsely flags a lot of law-abiding citizens. And we're going to hear a lot about this during the campaign because Hillary Clinton, on more than one occasion, I've heard her say it, and I know you have as well, that the Brady Act prohibited more than 2 million people from purchasing a gun. But weren't those just initial denials because an individual might have the same kind of name as somebody else?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I mean, it's just a completely false statement on Hillary Clinton's part. And the best analogy I can give you, again, is just to look at something like the late Senator Ted Kennedy, where there were 5 times where he was prevented from flying on a plane because his name, a similar name, was on the no-fly list. But I assume Hillary Clinton wouldn't count that as 5 times they stopped a terrorist from flying.
I don't think so. Yeah.
That's exactly the way they are counting them when they're talking about these guns being stopped from being sold for dangerous or prohibited people. It's one thing to stop a felon from buying a gun. It's another thing to stop somebody who simply has a name similar to a felon from buying a gun. And we don't know the exact number because government won't release the numbers. And the last annual report that was put out was in 2010. The Obama administration has stopped putting out these reports. But what we can determine is that the number of false positives is something around 99%. I think it's above that.
Wow.
I think it's, could be like 99.9 or something like that, but it's a very high percentage. So virtually all the 2.4 million people who have been stopped from buying a gun because of background checks have been stopped for the wrong reasons. They've stopped the wrong people. And there are many problems with that, but just one problem is some small but significant portion of those 2.4 million people may have really needed a gun for self-defense. The other thing is that it's basically racist.
Yes.
Because people tend to have names similar to others in their racial group. Hispanics tend to have names similar to other Hispanics. 40% of Vietnamese in this country have the same last name. Blacks tend to have names similar to other blacks, Jamal or whatever. And when you have it so that 30% or so of black males in the United States are legally forbidden from owning guns because of a criminal record, what you end up having is that who do they stop? Well, they're most likely to create these false positives for law-abiding black males who go and try to buy the gun legally. And the problem is the Obama administration's made this even worse because at least under past administrations, they would eventually check to see who was falsely denied and fix it. Now the Obama administration has pulled off everyone who was doing the double-checking there to see whether mistakes were made or not. And they're essentially forcing people to go and appeal. And while it's theoretically possible for somebody to do it without a lawyer, you're unlikely to be very successful navigating all the forms and what have you. And you're talking about people having to spend thousands of dollars to go and get these things fixed. And basically poor minorities are the ones who are going to be prevented from buying guns because of this.
Yes. Let's take a phone call. I want to get into another aspect of what needs to change in the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, but we'll go to California. KYCC. Chris, what would you like to add to our conversation today?
Well, I just find it very interesting that now it's not, the Democrats are not calling them assault rifles. Now they're weapons of war. And it's very interesting that I heard 4 people use that after the shooting in
Yes. Yeah, I'm sure
Florida.
That's focus tested. I'm sure it's a focus tested phrase that they thought might work better. Go ahead.
And then also, we just had a Jerry Brown here in California signed a bunch of laws that are supposed to take effect if they pass. But it's interesting how they did it on the Saturday before the 4th of July, when nobody's really paying attention. The agenda isn't really gun control. It's not about what type of gun. When you have a government in place right now that wants to be more of a dictatorship. They want all the guns. Doesn't matter what kind they are. They're going to try to get them. It's exactly what happened with, with Hitler in Germany.
Sure. Or, of course, we've been hearing a lot about Australia lately, haven't we, John Lott? As a matter of fact, Matt Damon the other day said, I wish we could do in the United States what you did in Australia. Well, that wasn't voluntary. That, as far as I could tell, it was pretty mandatory in terms of gun confiscation.
Right. There are a lot of points being brought up here. I just want to comment on the California stuff first that the caller brought up. And the thing, one of the laws that was just signed into law by Governor Brown makes it so that anybody with a misdemeanor, even a nonviolent misdemeanor, is now legally forbidden for life from being able to go and own a gun.
Wow.
And there are also these problems with the background checks. Now, they are going to require background checks as well as a registration for anybody who goes and buys ammunition. The thing is, these things aren't costless. It's just not the types of mistakes that we've been going through. But, you have to charge something for this. This takes time. In some place like Washington, D.C., it costs $125 to go and do
that was the other point. Yeah, and again, until we make that available for everyone, what we are doing is discriminating sometimes against people in racial minorities that have the same last name, also discriminate against people that are poor because it's much more expensive to buy a gun in the District of Columbia where you've added $125 to something that is already maybe financially out of your reach.
Right, and so the very people that my research indicates benefit the most from being able to go and protect themselves, they're the ones who are priced out of being able to defend themselves.
Sure. Well, I know your book, A War on Guns, is coming out, so as soon as it comes out, we'd love to have you back on Point of View and give you as long as you'd like to deal with all the specific elements in that book. So thank you for the good research that you do. Let me point people to the Crime Prevention Research Center. We have a link on our website. And Dr. John Lott, thank you for joining us. Let's do it again soon.
Oh, that's very nice of you. Thanks very much.
We will continue our conversation in the second hour, moving on to some of these other topics. And if you still have some questions or comments about gun control, we'll take some of those calls as well. But let me just mention that in the first hour, we did spend some time talking about James Comey and his testimony before Congress today about whether or not to indict Hillary Clinton. And, of course, we also mentioned that Senators John Cornyn and Cory Gardner have introduced a bill that would actually strip her of security clearance. When we come back, let's also add to that a couple of things. We've had the shooting of Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge. We've seen a couple of those videos. I want to talk about that and really hear from some of you in law enforcement that maybe can explain what is happening or maybe give us a critique. Of course, we also have police that have killed Philando Castile in Minnesota. And wasn't that chilling to watch his girlfriend actually do a live streaming after that event? So anyway, we need to take a break. We have a lot more to cover. We will do so. And if you'd like to join us on any of those topics, 1-800-351-1212. All of this available at our website, pointofview.net. We'll be right back.
Does Point of View make any difference? I think Dr. Eric Walsh would say it does. Dr. Walsh was fired from his job as District Health Director for the state of Georgia, not because of anything he did or failed to do on the job, but because of sermons he preached in his local church. What does that have to do with Point of View? Jeremy Dice of First Liberty is representing Dr. Walsh in his effort to correct this apparent injustice. And Jeremy Dice became an attorney specializing in defending religious liberty greatly because of what he learned listening to Point of View radio as a child. That is the kind of difference you make when you support the Truth Team, but we can't make that difference without your help. Become a partner today in this important mission of speaking the truth in love. Click on Join the Truth Team at pointofview.net. Choose your giving level, stretch a bit. Please do it today. Pointofview.net. or call 800-347-5151, pointofview.net, and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. We talked about James Comey being called to Congress to explain why he did not believe the Justice Department should indict Hillary Clinton. And I'd love to get your comments about that. We've also talked about Senators John Cornyn and Cory Gardner introducing a bill that would strip Hillary Clinton of her security clearance. We also have had a chance to talk with Dr. John Lott about issues of gun control legislation and why most terrorist attacks take place in gun-free zones. Not most, virtually all of them do. This hour I want to get into some of the shootings and a few other issues, but let me take at least one phone call left over from the previous hour in South Carolina. KJRT. Charles, thanks for calling today.
Hi, Kerby. Why am I the only one that notices certain things that I would think were totally obvious? We've got an administration here that doesn't let any of its officials march out of lockstep one bit in general. I'll give an example. They've obviously prohibited the use of the name ISIS. They all say ISIL, and the L stands for Levant, and the Levant includes Israel, and that's a little dig at Bibi and at Yahweh, by the way.
Good.
But
yes.
We saw James Comey diverge a little bit in that he said we cannot vet the Syrian refugee hotties, as I call them. And, this gained the confidence of conservatives and talking heads and so on. They said, well, if it's in this guy's hands, we got her, because he's a maverick. He's different. You know, to me, I even said it before he came out with this whitewash of Hillary, that that was just to label him as someone we could trust, and the conservative commentators went for it, hit hook, line, and sinker. I predicted this outcome, and there you have it.
Yep. Well, again, maybe we were played, but here we go. We'll find out. And if he was playing us, that's one thing. If he, as I suspect, was concerned about his legacy in history, I don't know. But in either case, you ended up with an individual who took us to the brink and talked about all the various abuses that came from Hillary Clinton, and then said we're not going to indict because we really don't have a precedent for that. Well, yes, we don't have much of a precedent for impeachment either, yet we decided to impeach Richard Nixon, and we decided to impeach Bill Clinton. And so, for almost 100 years, we hadn't had anybody impeached that was in the executive branch. So, sometimes it's time to turn some of those things around. But Charles, appreciate your perspective, and you're right about the issue of ISIS and ISIL. The L stands for Levant, and that was a term that was used to describe all of the Middle East, including Israel. So when the president uses ISIL, of course, now it's just probably called the Islamic State, and that's probably accurate enough. It was of concern to those of us that love Israel. So I appreciate that comment. We'll get some more in just a minute. By the way, if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. And let me just mention real quickly in passing that yesterday we did talk about the military Bible stick offer, and that was that an opportunity for us to talk about if you would maybe be interested, and I hope that all of you would. I hope that some of your churches, maybe Christian organizations, would want to maybe certainly certainly find a way to purchase one of these Bible sticks. We actually work with our good friends there that are spending so much time actually producing this. And again, we have on our website at pointofview.net an opportunity for you, if you want to actually go to that website. It's not ours, it's someone else's that will actually give you the information. Faith comes by hearing, or you can go to militarybiblestick.com. But either way, what we have done is an opportunity for you for just $25 to send a military Bible stick to one of our troops. And this is a way to really encourage some of the people, men and women, that serve in the armed forces. And because they have a matching grant that they've been able to put together, that means your $25 gift will provide it to 2 different members of the military. And as an additional benefit, when they receive their Bible stick, they also will have a card that would allow them to request a free audio New Testament that they can send back to their family, or a kid's Bible. So again, this is just a great opportunity, and from time to time we like to do this. Remember, we did this with the Cradle Fund to really, again, send all the money to the Cradle Fund. Nothing that we took out here at Point of View, just to really be an encouragement to the refugees. And this is a way in which we really want to be an encouragement to those in the military. So if you didn't have a chance to respond yesterday, please take the time to go to our website today, pointofview.net. In the lower right-hand corner, it says, again, Military Bible Stick, just $25 gives God's Word to one of our troops. We should change it to 2, since, again, they have that opportunity for doubling that income. And the great opportunity is the Bible sticks are actually shipped to the chaplains, and then they distribute it to the various troops. This, of course, allows them then to distribute them even in majority Muslim countries like Iraq and Afghanistan. And yesterday, of course, we heard the president say that we're going to keep those troops in Afghanistan. So that is just another benefit as well. Let me, if I can, add one more topic or two to the conversation today, and that has to do with these shootings. And there have been thousands that have protested over the shooting of Alton Sterling. You perhaps have seen the video or heard about it. I don't necessarily recommend it, but what you have here is an individual that was selling CDs outside of a convenience store. The cops are seen yelling to Sterling to get on the ground. He does not. He's tackled by the police. They're on top of him. The officers are on top of him. And somewhere you hear one of them say he's got a gun. And so then all of a sudden, the police officer shoots. Now, again, we recognize that sometimes the videos only tell part of the story. We don't know exactly what preceded there. Some people have suggested that maybe he had a gun in his hand, maybe he was going for the gun. I don't know all the details, but those of you that are in law enforcement, perhaps you've seen the video and can explain to me, at least, why an individual who's on his back and 2 police officers are on top of him, why that would be a justification for shooting. And if there's ever been a video that certainly seems to be making the case for Black Lives Matter, that is the case. And so that's the first issue I want to put on the table. Then we have a second one, and this has come out of Minnesota. It has to do with the shooting of Philando Castile, who was shot by a police officer who had actually, by the way, Castile had said that he had a weapon and he had a license to carry it. So this is why some people said, well, where's the NRA now in defending his rights? But nevertheless, you have this video, and again, it's a really chilling video of Diamond Reynolds, her, again, this is her boyfriend, while he's, essentially dying next to her. She is live streaming this on video. So, again, you've had not only protesters that have shown up in Baton Rouge at the store where, indeed, you have the shooting of Alton Sterling, but you've also had hundreds of protesters show up before in front of the Minnesota governor's house. So if you'd like to join us on that issue, I would certainly want to put that one on the table as well and talk about some of the lessons maybe we can learn from that, and also to recognize that it's going to be a long, hard summer, because these stories and these videos seem to be the kind of example that Black Lives Matter have been looking for. Let's take a break. We'll be back with more right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Pro-life groups and legislatures wonder what they might be able to do in light of the Supreme Court decision last week. The 5-3 decision that struck down the legislation in Texas left little room for any future pro-life legislation. The court's ruling prevented the state of Texas from regulating the health and safety standards of abortion clinics. It also struck down the common sense requirement that a physician performing an abortion also have admitting privileges in a hospital within 30 miles of where the procedure is performed. The majority on the court argued that it was an undue burden on women to require abortion clinics be governed by the same rules as ambulatory surgical centers. And in throwing out the law, they also threw out the requirement that abortion clinics comply with basic fire safety standards. Consider the irony for a moment. Progressives in our government want to regulate nearly every industry except the abortion industry, and the High Court seems content to let them do it. We have regulations on the air we breathe and the water we drink. We have regulations about the light bulbs you can have in your home. Many are now working hard to regulate guns out of existence without even having to repeal the Second Amendment. But when it comes to killing the unborn in abortion clinics, they don't want any limits or any rules. It's difficult to see what pro-life legislators can do until the makeup of the Supreme Court changes. The 5 justices have effectively ruled against just about any common sense regulation of abortion clinics. That is why the November election will be crucial. 3 of the 5 in the majority are due for retirement. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is 83 years of age. Justice Anthony Kennedy will turn 80 this summer, and Justice Stephen Breyer will turn 78 this summer. It is clear that the next president will determine the pro-life future. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Let's focus on some of these shootings for just a few minutes. And the first one, of course, and the one that has certainly caused a great deal of concern, has to do with the shooting and killing of Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge. Again, if you're not familiar with that, and I'm not necessarily recommending that you watch the video, but if you do, it is very graphic footage of an individual who was actually selling CDs out of a convenience store in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The video shows the officers throwing him to the ground by 2 police officers after a complaint about a man making threats with a gun. Okay, so you come onto the scene. There's a possibility that you are dealing with an armed suspect. It's a possibility that it's a false story, but you don't really know. And so they are yelling at him to get on the ground. He does not. So eventually he gets tackled by the officers. Then Alton Sterling continues to move on the ground. He's struggling in some way. The officer believes that he is reaching for the gun and then points it at this individual's chest. One of the officers then yells, "He's got a gun. You got," and I won't get into the words that they use there. Less than 2 seconds later, the first shot is heard, followed quickly by 2 others. 3 more shots are heard as the startled shop owner momentarily turns his camera away from the scene. So we have a video, and it fits the, if you will, the narrative of white police officers killing a black suspect on the ground. And so here he's lying on the ground. The blood is seeping from his chest. And of course, he dies. So here is what you have in this video. Now, you can go to all the background information about whether this individual had a criminal record, whether or not he had later been, in one way or another, had a run-in with the police. We can go into all of that, but you have at least the video that seems to show police officers overreacting. Love to hear from any of you that are in law enforcement, perhaps have seen the video and can give us some more perspective on that, but it is a source of some concern because it maybe fits the meme or the narrative that indeed white officers are quite willing to kill black suspects, and that is exactly what you see. The case in Minnesota is a little bit different. The video we have here actually is after an individual has actually fired his weapon at the individual, Philando Castile, and he was shot in an area in Minnesota. It's Falcon Heights, St. Paul. And again, this is where you have, which is just such a chilling video, because imagine if your boyfriend has been shot. The last thing I would probably even think to do would turn on my cell phone and begin to have this live streaming as her boyfriend is dying next to her. During that time, you have the police officer who seems like he is overreacted, telling her to show her hands and all of the rest, still illustrating that, again, this was perhaps an overreaction. So these are two shooting incidents which I think we're going to be hearing about for some time. And you have to lay this over the conversation we had just a week or two ago with Heather McDonald, because we talked about her book, War Against Cops. And she has talked about what is called the Ferguson effect. And that is, ever since you've had the shooting of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, there has been what many people, and she sort of coined the term, but now many people have talked about the Ferguson effect. It's been controversial because some people said there is no Ferguson effect. Others, interestingly enough, who actually have been critical of it, have looked at the facts and figures and said, well, no, maybe there is. And it has to do with a study that came out in the Journal of Criminal Justice that found that homicides in the 12 months after the shooting of Michael Brown in Ferguson rose significantly. These homicides rose significantly, and part of it had to do with the way in which the police were reacting to various kinds of crimes. The first is that a lot of what is called proactive policing was not taking place. That is, I don't want to be on the next video that shows up. I'm not going to go into the community and do things that in the past might have been helpful in preventing crime. Those could have been drug stops and various traffic stops and those kinds of things. I will go into a community when 911 is called, but I'm not going to be proactive. And that has been the argument that Heather McDonald and others have made about the so-called Ferguson effect. Well, you can begin to think about this issue as it plays itself out, because you can think, as in the mind of almost any police officer, do I want to be the next person that shows up in one of these videos? And, of course, the problem with, I think, the case with Alton Sterling was they do have, I think they had body cams, but they came off during the confrontation, so they don't provide any additional information. Couple things I might say, and then I'll want to open up for your phone calls. The first is that any time you have a police officer ask you to do anything, here's just a very helpful tip. Comply with that. You know, on the one hand, let me talk to my African-American friends and then also to my Anglo-American friends. I'll talk about my white friends first. You know, I have seen enough of these videos on YouTube, usually from some individual that is really into libertarian kind of philosophy, and they turn on the video cam, and then the police officer asks them to get out of the vehicle and say, I don't have to get out of the vehicle. I know my constitutional rights. Or they're carrying an open carry, and they're saying, I can carry a gun. I know my constitutional rights. And sometimes that may be true, but it's not helpful, is probably a good way to put that. An individual who is in law enforcement, maybe already had a bad day, maybe already had a run-in with somebody else, is not going to be too thrilled about the fact that you're not willing to comply. And so as a result, you are putting yourself into a dangerous situation, even because you're trying to emphasize your constitutional rights with an individual who, quite frankly, may not understand the Constitution, may not necessarily be the best example on the police force, might be a bad apple that already has a bad attitude. It just isn't a wise thing to begin to talk about all of your constitutional rights when a police officer asks you to do something, and whether it's to hand over your ID, whether it's to get out of a vehicle, do so, because we can see the consequences. And in particular, to those who may actually be in a traffic stop, and maybe you are African American, look at what happened in this case to Alton Sterling. Look at what happened in this particular case to Philando Castile. I believe the police officers may indeed be guilty, but that doesn't make it any less likely that you paid a heavy price, your life in this particular case, by not being willing to comply. And I heard somebody call into a talk show today saying, I wish I could tell some people in our community, if nothing else, train some of these young kids that think they're really hot, that they just need to know how to get arrested. It's one thing to be arrested. It's another thing to be dead on the street. And sometimes there is a cockiness that actually creates a situation, escalates a situation, and puts people in danger. So that is another lesson I wish we could pass on. But over the next couple of weeks, I suspect we're going to be hearing a lot about what happened in Baton Rouge, what happened in Minnesota. And so I'd love to get your comments about those particular shootings. And if you have a perspective as a law enforcement officer, again, one of the reasons we did the program with Heather McDonald is to recognize that there really has been a war on cops. There really is a need to support those in law enforcement. And as we are talking about even today, we want to do what we can to support those individuals that serve in the military, but we'll try to find some way to support those in law enforcement as well. But if you have not taken the time to actually get a Bible stick to one of our service members, I would encourage you to do so. It is a military Bible stick offer. We have it still available on our website, pointofview.net. For just $25, you can give God's word to one of those in serving overseas. And when we, as we talked about yesterday, recognize so many individuals maybe have access to very little to read. And certainly when you're on deployment, reading is not something you can be doing. But as you are maybe behind the lines, as you are cleaning a weapon, as you are cleaning up your area, you can be listening to God's word, and this is something which is about the size, really, of a pack of chewing gum. It uses one AAA battery, and it gives you the entire audio New Testament plus some of the Psalms, and this is really something that is designed with military specifications so that it can be used when they are on deployment. And if you would like to be an encouragement to those who are in the military, let me encourage you to click on that button that says just $25 gives God's word to one of our troops, and that will take you to our good friends there that are actually taking the time to distribute those through chaplains to those in the military. But in this last half hour, let's open up the phones. We've talked about James Comey. We've talked about certainly Hillary Clinton. We've talked about the whole issue of gun control and, of course, some of these shootings that are in the news as well. A lot more to cover, but we'd love to get your comments. 1-800-351-1212. 1-800-351-1212. An open line in this last half hour. We'll take your calls right after this.
The information age. It used to be news was hard to come by and there were very few sources. Now, the problem isn't so much locating information, it's all over the place. The problem is figuring out who you can trust to bring you truthful analysis and insights. Job loss in America. Is it China's fault? Is poverty around the world increasing or decreasing? Are the undercover Planned Parenthood videos really deceptive propaganda or a window into a world that many people don't want you to know about? What kind of experience does it take to be a good president? Is putting women in our special forces a great idea, or are there issues you may not be considering? Kerby Anderson has talked about all of these and much more on his regular Viewpoints commentaries. Sign up to get them in your inbox each weekday. Go to pointofview.net. Click on the link at the very top left of the page that says Connect with Point of View. That's pointofview.net and connect with Point of View. Let Kerby help you sort through information overload and find the truth with Viewpoints. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour, if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. At the moment, talking about some of the shootings, and again, the death of Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge, as well as Philando Castile in Minnesota. And again, we don't want to jump to conclusions, but the reality is a lot of people have. Just look at the thousands of people that showed up to protest after this video. Actually, now 2 videos have come out about the shooting of Alton Sterling, and the hundreds of people that have even gone to the Minnesota governor's house. This is going to be an issue that I think will be around for some time. So I wanted to hear from some of you that might be able to give us some perspective. So let's go to Georgia, first of all, and talk to Sam. What would you like to talk about?
Kerby, how you doing?
Good.
Thanks for taking my call. One of my observations is this. I do think cops or police officers are under attack. But I'd also like to say this. You also, in every walk of life, in every profession, you have irresponsible people.
Sure.
Who are quick to jump to conclusions, or they prejudge. And from what I saw on television, it looked like the gentleman they had on the ground, he was contained. But the thing is, you have, like I said, you have bad people in all walks of life. And I think when officers act out of character, and I realize they have a tough job, but the thing is, when you do, and it's sort of, you prefixed your mind to do certain things because you have already been influenced of what's going on in the rest of the country, you not only as an officer put the public in danger, you put your fellow officers in danger because it takes quite a bit of time to get down to the bottom of what's the cause and why the police officers handle themselves the way they do. Case in point, in New York, 2 officers were shot to death. Had nothing to do with the shooting or the killing of the man in Brooklyn. And I think those officers who know that they have rotten officers within their precinct or on the force, they need to maybe drop a dime or a quarter on them. And not only that, when you look at the stress factor, I don't know what their policy is. I think you need to take another such psychological testing on officers randomly to see where they are. Hey, look at the air controllers. Some of them retire because of the stress. Yeah. And I don't think that a police officer job is any less stressful than an air controller.
I think it's more so. Yeah, it's one of the toughest jobs out there. And again, if you make a mistake in a lot of professions, well, no harm, no foul. But if you make a mistake when you're a police officer, especially with a deadly force, you know what the consequences are.
Right. And to much is given, much is expected. I salute them. But, hey, please, if you got a bad apple in the barrel, I think you better drop a dime because it's going to affect you one way or the other. And it may cost another officer his life. And those officers who are quick to react and reach judgment, and people may say, well, look at their job as dangerous. But you got some cops out there who have never fired a shot, who have taken guys down.
Right.
And those are the real heroes, not these ones who are able to jump to a conclusion and shoot a man while he's down on the ground. And I watched the way they pin that man. That's uncalled for.
Yeah, I know. And again, it doesn't look good. Again, we don't have all the facts. We don't have all the video that what preceded it, but it just does not look good. And that's why I wanted to hear from some people that maybe can give us some perspective on that. Maybe I'm missing something, but we will certainly be hearing about it for some time, like I said. Let me take another phone call or two. I want to give as many of you a chance to weigh in with your comments or questions. And we'll head to Texas this time. Daniel, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. I really enjoy your show. I used to be in military police, and I work with civil authorities. And but when people get pulled over by the police, you got to know how to respect them because God instituted authority, and we need to pray and for the police officers that is on duty.
Yes.
I always go up and say, I thank you for your service. When I wear my uniform, they always thanking me because I'm in the military. But we need to pray for the police officers. And the way you get out, like I got out of a ticket because I was polite to the police officer and everything. But some people think, well, that's my constitutional rights, and that's why they just get in trouble.
And that's kind of what I was saying. I mean, again, I understand that, and whatever your ethnic background is, whatever your socioeconomic situation is, there is a sense in which we are creating a little bit of a mindset that says, well, I'm going to stand up for my constitutional rights. You don't have a right to do that. Or, no, I'm not going to get on the ground. Or, no, I'm not going to get out of the car. Or, no, I'm not going to show you my ID. That's just not a good action. It frankly could be very dangerous in some circumstances. If nothing else, it certainly escalates the situation. And part of it has to do, and I want to hear your comments, Daniel, about this. When people have a cell phone and they're saying that, it's almost like they can't wait to put it on YouTube to show, well, I showed that officer. Well, that's not a good thing either, because, that officer might have had a bad day, or he may have been one of those people Sam was talking about just a minute ago that maybe isn't the best example on the police force. And you're not helping yourself when you use that kind of attitude and you have those kinds of actions, because you've been on the other side of that. You know how you reacted to it, and you can imagine how some of your fellow officers would have reacted to it.
People today need to, when you have your cell phone and all that, and you go ahead and do stuff, you're abusing, you're just abusing yourself, and don't respect when a police officer asks you to do something, do it out of courtesy, and you won't get in any trouble.
Yeah. Well, Daniel, I appreciate the fact that you have actually been in law enforcement and as an MP, and appreciate you sharing that. And it sounds like you're a pastor now?
Yes, I've been in the ministry since 1976.
Well, again, wish you well. Thank you for your service, both in law enforcement and now in the ministry. Thank you for calling in today.
Okay, well, God bless you.
Thank you. Let's take a few more phone calls. We'll head out to Kentucky this time. Roger, what would you like to add to the conversation?
Hey, I just want to say, I wish we could all just get along. I work with a bunch of Mexicans and African Americans, and we all get along up there where I work at. We all laugh and cut up, and we all get along good. And I don't understand. All you got to do is just be nice to people. Why can't people just be nice?
I don't understand it. Again, I recognize that sometimes confrontations heat up, road rage, and, sometimes somebody has been disrespectful and how some of this develops. But, we just have one tragedy after another. And of course, I've just highlighted here 2 killings. You look at just the number of young people that were killed in Chicago this weekend, this 4th of July weekend. I was looking at those numbers as well. And this crime wave that has developed in part because of maybe the lack of respect for authority, and also due to what Heather McDonald talked about, the Ferguson effect. But I agree with you. I mean, why can't we get along?
The guy over here, he don't have no vehicle, and he walks down the train tracks to go home. But I pick him up occasionally and take him as far as I can from the store with his groceries. Yep. He's African American. I mean, what about it? I mean, he's just different skin color. He's the same as I am.
Yep. Well, again, you got a good attitude, and Roger, I wish more people had that. Maybe we would get along and we wouldn't have these kind of tragedies. Let's head to Texas. KSWP. Carolyn, thank you for calling today.
Thank you for taking my call. I was, the comment that you made a few minutes ago about Black people lives matter groups are just looking for something like this. I thought that was a very callous comment, because nobody, whatever color or gender or race you are, looks for something like this.
Yeah. Well, again, maybe you are not familiar with the organization, because I hate to say it, but the organization has been, in some respects, wanting to take advantage of it. We can say that. I mean, I recognize that sounds like a very callous comment, but if you look at some of the statements being by that organization, Black Lives Matter, and some of the horrible things they've said about police officers, I don't know. But okay, I'll take that admonition, but we need to take a break, and when we come back, we'll take some more phone calls. If you'd like to join the conversation today, that's certainly welcome to do so. 1-800-351-1212. We are certainly talking about this issue of the shootings. And, of course, we've also talked earlier about some of the testimony in front of Congress by James Comey. Got a couple other issues to put on the table, but that has to come right after these messages.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
For a few more minutes, if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Let's go to Texas, KBJS, and Elizabeth. Thank you for calling today.
Yes, hello. I was listening to the radio station, and I heard you talking about Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter. I'm a 60-year-old black woman, and I think all lives matter. All those statements should be scratched except for all lives matter.
Yes.
And the other thing I would like to talk about is that, I've been stopped by the police several times, either for speeding or not doing anything. We were pulled over. We had a mobile home. It was totally strip searched. For 4.5 hours, we were on the side of the road. They found absolutely nothing. But yet they said we had drugs in the mobile home, but they found nothing. And I'm speaking nice to the person, to the officers. My husband is speaking nice to the officers. But yet this still happens to us. So you can't just say, speak nice. It's something that happens. There are good officers and there are bad officers.
Yep.
Whether you speak nice or not.
And the point I was making is that sometimes you might have ended up with the bad lottery pick and you ended up with the bad police officer. And my advice to individuals is, even when they're a jerk, even if they have a racist bone in their body, just, the best thing to do is just try to go along as best as you can, because we have some examples of those who didn't comply, and now they're planning funerals for them. And that's a sad commentary, too. But I recognize. Go ahead.
It is a sad commentary. Yes, we should speak nice to the officers. There's nothing wrong with that. And I'm just saying be respectful. But also, they should be respectful to us.
Yes. Oh, I agree. I agree. And
you're asking the black community to do one thing, but talk to the officers, too. Let them know that, hey, we're not out here trying to get killed every day.
That's right.
You know what? That's not what we're out here trying to do.
Yeah, respect goes both ways. I will have respect for you as basically an officer of the state, but you should have respect for me as well. But
exactly.
I agree.
And I had a young woman. She's white. We were talking about a right to carry arms, and I said, I have a I can't even think of it right now, but I have a permit to carry. And she said, well, I don't have a permit to carry, but I just carry my weapon. I said, well, if I were in your situation, I would have a permit to carry. She said, why? I said, because if I get pulled over with a gun in my car, I'm likely going to go to jail, no matter how nice I am. And you know something, too? I've never been pulled over by a black officer. Never.
And again, I'm the first to say, I still think there is a resident and residual racism in America. But again, what do you do when that is the reality, and how do you react? And certainly there's a lesson that I hope we can pass on to at least our young people here. Don't be belligerent. Don't be defiant, because it's not going to make a bad situation any better. It's just going to make it worse.
I agree with you. And I think we all should scratch the statement, Blue Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. We should put on our cards, if we're going to put anything, all lives matter.
Good for you.
I would challenge anybody to do that.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Appreciate your phone call. Want to see if we can get a few more phone calls in real quickly. In Illinois, Nick, what would you like to add to our conversation today?
Well, that lady right ahead of me said it perfectly. That lady is just right on, and she is to be commended for what she just said. That we need to call out the 10% of the bad law enforcement, and we need to reward the 90% that's doing a good job. Now, we need to go to Congress, and since all this is happening now, we need to call our congressmen and our local people and say, let's figure out a way to get rid of the bad apples, like that gentleman 2 or 3 callers ahead so perfectly said.
Yes.
We need to get rid of the bad apples, and we need to reward with extra pay and the good. And I know that there's good law enforcement out there. They're in my town, and I love them. They're wonderful people, and they're excellent professionals. But the problem is we got 10%, and I think they're on the younger side, guys with less experience. We need to put those guys in different jobs, like at a desk or something, get them off the street so they can't do any harm, and so they get at least 10 years of experience to get out on the street when they're dealing with. There are guys that just shouldn't be out there, and there's got to be a way to know who's who, because we can't have this. We can't rope and put men down like they're a steer at a rodeo.
Yeah,
that can't happen.
Nick, I appreciate your very concrete suggestions. We're always looking for action items. Now, I don't know how to make that an action item. We're going to be doing an action item tomorrow, so I'll certainly be paying attention there as we talk about one of the religious liberty issues. But Marty up in Alaska, KJNP, I think you had a suggestion for Elizabeth, so go ahead.
Thank you. Good to hear you. I am suggesting that if you're one of those people who has been polite, bent over backwards to put up with the officer and their bad attitude while they're dealing with you, get their name, get their badge number, and report them to their superiors. And your single complaint may not do anything, but it will go in his record, or a number of these complaints may allow his superiors to finally terminate him.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Again, searching the motorhome, accusing them of having drugs when they are innocent, I think it's about time to let somebody in the local police force know that these individuals did not treat me with respect, and I have come to expect that and should expect that from law enforcement officers. And getting it on a person's record might eventually get to the point where maybe not 1 strikes you're out, but maybe 3 to 5 strikes and you're out. And that only happens if you report those individuals. So good point.
Thank you. I agree.
Let's take one more phone call real quickly. I wish I had a little more time, but we'll get to some more of those tomorrow. So, Don in Oklahoma, I think you get the last comment of the day. What would you like to add to everything we've talked about?
Oh, well, thank you very much. A couple things he was talking about, respecting the officers when they stop. I think the officers should respect us.
Sure.
We pay their salaries, and I wore a badge for 8 years, so I've been on both sides. And if they ID us for no reason, that's against our Fourth Amendment. And then they take our Second Amendment where they shot the gentleman that had the gun on the side. Then are they going to take our First Amendment where I have to tell you what you can say on the radio and you don't have a right to do that?
Yeah, I mean, you got to be real careful about that. So again,
very careful.
Yeah.
And I also disagree with when you talked about video on it, just put it on YouTube. The reason they video it is because anytime you go to court, they always believe the police officer unless it's on video.
Unless it's on video, yeah.
100% of the time they believe the police officers.
Yep. And again, the videos, especially if they cover it all, that the problem is sometimes they start it, and of course they didn't know this was going to happen, and you miss all the things that preceded the incident. So again, that's the difficulty. Sometimes when you see a video, you think, well, that's accurate. Well, it may not be either. It may not be showing you all the pieces, and that's why I think these body cams may be a way to exonerate the good officers and also condemn the bad officers. So
I agree. They have saved officers. We actually put them in our cars at work because actually my boss got stopped and he fought the ticket and won, but he said, "No, we're not doing this. We're just going to put dash cams in our cars that have the GPS positioning and tell how fast we're going on them."
Very good. Don, appreciate your comments. I wish we had a little more time, but we're just about out of time. Let me mention again, we have that Bible stick offer for the military, and if you would like to be an encouragement to those that serve in the armed forces, love to encourage you to do so, and that's at our website, pointofview.net. If you'd like to find some of the other articles we've posted today on everything from Hillary Clinton and political corruption to terrorist targeting gun-free zones and much, much more, it is all available at our website, pointofview.net. I want to thank Andrew, Catherine, and Shamila for their help behind the scenes. Tomorrow, our Friday weekend edition. We've got a lot to cover. We'll see you then.
Does Point of View make any difference? I think Dr. Eric Walsh would say it does. Dr. Walsh was fired from his job as district health director for the state of Georgia, not because of anything he did or failed to do on the job, but because of sermons he preached in his local church. What does that have to do with Point of View? Jeremy Dice of First Liberty is representing Dr. Walsh in his effort to correct this apparent injustice. And Jeremy Dice became an attorney specializing in defending religious liberty greatly because of what he learned listening to Point of View radio as a child. That is the kind of difference you make when you support the Truth Team, but we can't make that difference without your help. Become a partner today in this important mission of speaking the truth in love. Click on Join the Truth Team at pointofview.net. Choose your giving level, stretch a bit. Please do it today. Pointofview.net or call 800-347-5151. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.